In today's review session, we are looking at the Chapter 12 mastery problem. Keep in mind that because these problems may be generated algorithmically, the numbers that you see in your problem may, in some respects, differ from the numbers in my problem. So the calculations we do, the steps we take will still be the same. It is exactly the same problem, but some of the numbers may be changed. Pranks Incorporated is a manufacturer of joke and novelty products for perpetrators of practical jokes. The corporation has paid several cash dividends throughout year 6, which is the current year. It is also declaring a stock dividend to its stockholders as the calendar year end approaches. You've been brought in as a consultant to assist with this process and also to help determine whether some missing information can be determined before the distribution of the stock dividend is made. The company has 2 classes of stock. They have common stock. They also have cumulative preferred stock. We can see some information there about their common shares that are authorized and issued, par value of the preferred shares, some additional information about how much paid in capital they have from the common stock, none from the preferred stock, and they have $33.5 million in retained earnings before the stock dividend is declared. They have no treasury shares have been reissued. So we have a table there that shows us how much has been paid in dividends over the first 5 years, and now we are in year 6. So they have paid some dividends in year 6 as well. The accounting manager for the company prepared the schedule of cash dividends from year 1 to year 6. However, one of the reasons for Pranks Incorporated's missing information is that the manager is away on vacation and is unreachable by phone because he's backpacking on a remote island that does not have cell phone reception. I want to go to that island. Management would like you to determine some information from the data you've collected regarding its outstanding stock. First, how many shares of common stock are outstanding? So we can see, and we could do this from any one of the years, assuming that the number hasn't changed. So get my annotate up here. So as is frequently the case with the mastery problems, they want us to think about things maybe not in the same order that we would typically do these calculations. So if we were to take, I'm just going to put a basic formula here on the screen. The number of, I'm going to call them C shares for common shares, just to give myself a little bit more room here. The number of common shares and multiplied by the dividend per share, we would get the total cash dividends. So that's the standard equation. We know how much each share is getting. We know how many shares there are. We can calculate the total dividends. Well, in this case, what we don't know is the number of common shares. But we do know for 4 years, the total that was paid, whoops, and I'll just use year 6, $180,000 in dividends were paid, and that was 30 cents per share. So I can solve this formula for the number of common shares by dividing each side by the dividends per share. Write that just a little bit clearer so it's. And so I took that formula that we already know and simply solved for the piece that we don't know. So again, if the number of shares was the same each of the 4 years that dividends were paid to the common shareholders, we could use any one of those 4. I'm just going to use year 6 because it's the most recent. So we take the $180,000 and divide by the 30 cents per share. see that there are 600,000 common shares. That makes sense? So looking at what we were given here, they have issued 650,000 shares, but there are only, dividends were only paid on 600,000 shares. The reason that there would be a difference between those two numbers is because we have 50,000 shares of treasury stock. So how many shares of preferred stock are outstanding? So they're, the par value of the cumulative preferred shares is $30. Let's see, we can use the same formula, the same approach. Now, I just want to point out, in year one, we only paid 20 cents in dividends. Year two, we paid 36. And year three went down to 34. Then we became steady at 30 cents per share. So what probably happened there? It is probably the case that the full dividend on the shares is 30 cents per share. And in year one, they only paid 20 cents per share. So 10 cents per share carried over as dividends in arrears. In year two, then they were able to make up 6 cents of that 10. In year three, they made up the final 4 cents and no longer had any dividends in arrears. And so that this 30 cents per share is actually the full dividend on those preferred shares. So to figure out how many preferred shares they have outstanding, I might annotate here so I can put it on the screen. I'm going to use that same formula, except substitute preferred shares for common shares. So I'm going to use that total dividends, and I'm going to use one of the years that the full dividend was paid and no dividends in arrears. So year 4, 5, or 6. $45,000 divided by 30 cents per share. Tells me we have 150,000 preferred shares outstanding. Stop me if you have questions. The next question we're asked is, what is the preferred dividend as a percent of par? So we know the preferred dividend, the full dividend is 30 cents, because we know that these 3 years are not representative because there were dividends in arrears. The par value of the preferred stock is right here, $30. Whoops, $30. And so we're asked, 30 cents is what percent of that $30? And let me get my annotate up here. So 30 cents divided by $30 is 1%. And so the stated dividend rate on that preferred stock must be 1%. The next question. After completing the cash dividends panel, answer the following question. Does Pranks Incorporated have any treasury stock? How can you tell? And I already answered that without realizing there was a question down at the bottom. So we have 650,000 shares issued, but we have established that there are only 600,000 outstanding. And so the difference between the number of shares issued and outstanding is the treasury stock And so that would be the answer, yes, because the number of shares issued is greater than the number of shares outstanding. For number 2, in which years has Pranks Incorporated paid cumulative preferred dividends in arrears? So they created the dividends in arrears in year 1, and then they paid them in year 2 and year 3 when their total dividends exceeded the 30 cents per share. So that's when they were paying dividends in arrears. So the answer would be B and C. Everybody's good? So the last part of this question deals with the stock dividend. The company declares a 2% common stock dividend on December 1st. So remember, the stock dividend only goes to the outstanding shares. We've already established there are 600,000 shares outstanding. So 600 shares times 2% means we would issue an additional 12,000 shares of common stock for that stock dividend. So a 2% stock dividend is what is classified as a small stock dividend. Anything less than 25% is a small stock dividend. And we use the fair market value at the time the dividend is declared as a proxy or as a representation of the value of that dividend. We realize that issuing more shares means that our stock price is almost certainly going to fall, but we determine that if the dividend itself, the stock dividend itself, if the percent is less than 25%, then we figure it's going to be a negligible difference. And so we use the fair market value. And if the dividend is a large stock dividend, that is 25% up to, but not including 100%, which would be a stock split, we use just the par value as the proxy for the value of that stock dividend. And if it's a stock split, as we saw in our exercises for the chapter, we actually don't move any value out of retained earnings and into contributed capital. So we know that the total stockholders' equity is not going to be changed by the stock dividend. What changes is the split between paid in or contributed capital and retained earnings. So let's start with our paid in capital. So our paid in capital includes the par value for the issued shares. So let's do some, let me get my writer back up here. So our paid in capital or contributed capital includes, we'll start with the preferred stock, the par value on the preferred stock. Oh, now how many shares did we say there were? Scroll down. So there are 150,000 shares of preferred stock, and the par value on those is $30 per share. So 150,000 shares at $30 per share is $4.5 million for the par value. And it tells us there is no paid in capital in excess of par on that preferred stock. So we'll just move on to the common stock. We know that there are 650,000 shares of common stock that have been issued, but there are 600,000 outstanding. So we know that the 50,000 shares are typically shown as a deduction or a reduction, maybe is a better word, in our equity. And so we have 600,000 shares that are still outstanding. At $20 is the par value for those. So that's a total of 12 million. 12 million. I wish my calculator would put commas in there. And then we have some paid in capital in excess of par. Just abbreviating that. And that is the 7 million. So let's total those up. And I got 23,500,000. So this is a little awkward because normally we think of that treasury stock as a separate line item. It doesn't tell us how to deal with the treasury stock, but I'm going to assume that they subtracted that treasury stock from the paid in capital. And that's not how we normally would display it. But it doesn't give us enough information to have it as a separate line item. So now we have retained earnings before the dividend is declared, 33,500,000. For a total of 57 million in equity. So we said they were going to issue we have 600,000 shares outstanding. That should say 600,000 shares outstanding, 2% dividend. We're going to issue 12,000 new shares. And we're going to use the value of the shares, the fair market value, at the time the dividend is declared as the value of that dividend. So 12,000 shares at $24 is $288,000. Just gonna put that calculation on the screen. 12,000 new shares are going to be issued, and we use the fair market value of $24 as the value. And so what we do is move that value out of retained earnings and into contributed capital. So 33,500,000. We're going to remove from that 288,000, and we will be left with 33,212,000 in retained earnings. And we're going to add the 288 to the total paid in capital. And so the total stockholders' equity remains unchanged, but the distribution or the split between paid in capital or contributed capital and the retained earnings is different. We move the value of the dividend from retained earnings into contributed capital.